My 23-year-old female boyfriend, let's call him Milan, 22-year-old male, is really proud of his Romani heritage. We've been dating for almost 2 years. I've always had reservations about him bringing it up around my family and close friends, especially considering they can be pretty conservative. I've gently warned Milan before that it might not be the best idea to mention that subject, but he's always been pretty open about his background. At a recent family gathering, where my dad asked about Milan's full name, Milan mentioned his Romani roots and talked very proudly about his family heritage, a mix of Chilean and Romani. My family started cracking jokes. My mom tried to defend Milan and call him a handsome gypsy. It was cringeworthy, but Milan graciously accepted my mom's attempt to lighten the mood with a hug and kiss on the cheek. My dad and 2 older brothers were on the meaner side though, throwing lame jokes and barely keeping it together when Milan was talking about the names of his cousins and aunties. You know, saying weird stuff like, "Oh, that sounds like a pain medication," or "That's a lot of points for Scrabble right there," and some borderline xenophobic stuff about being grateful we're not in a third world country. My younger sister gave my dad a nasty side-eye, but sort of zoomed out of the conversation. I froze up and just laughed along nervously, hoping it would blow over. To make matters worse, we started discussing a family weekend getaway that's coming up real soon, a tradition to celebrate my mom's birthday. My mom invited Milan right then and there, but my dad couldn't resist making a snide comment about inviting tramps and thieves too. Some lazy joke referencing an old Cher song, I guess. Milan was a good sport and accepted the invitation. A few days later, I straight up lied to Milan, telling him the trip was cancelled. I know it was a white lie, but I just couldn't bear the thought of him enduring all those thoughtless comments from my family. And yeah, I'm skipping out on the trip too. I love Milan. He's perfect in any other aspect, and the last thing I wanted was for him to feel uncomfortable or ridiculed during what was supposed to be a relaxing getaway. I confided in my sister about all this, and she called me out, saying I'm no better than the rest of the family. I mean, it's not like I'm planning to never invite Milan to family events again. It's just until the whole conversation about his heritage dies down. Edit. Grammar and spell check. Removing surname. Info. I've corrected family and friends in the past, but it's challenging when their comments are brushed off as jokes. When I mentioned my boyfriend is perfect in any other way, I'm referring to this issue. Not his background. I'm not implying it's his fault or that I don't value his background. Last edit. I'll take the advice and confront my family. I'll come clean to my boyfriend. Milan laughs everything off. He pulls off his charming smile, and it's like it's not even an issue for him. He's always the bigger person in every situation. We've been called a coward, and yeah, I've always struggled to confront my dad and brothers. That's on me. That's my fault. Someone said, you aren't ready to be Milan's partner, and that he deserves better. And you know, maybe you guys are right, but I want to do better. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. You're the idiot. Lying is never the answer, and this isn't a white lie. You should have been honest with him and talked to your family about their insulting comments. You can't expect it to magically die down. Be upfront and let them know you will not be around until they learn to treat your significant other with respect. Comment 2. You're the idiot. The people who need to be handled are your family. Your boyfriend deserves better. And by the way, your upbringing is definitely showing in how you talk about his weird name and such. Plus, you use his real name if this isn't a troll post, which I'm not sure about. Now for the update. A lot has happened since my last post, and I'm still reeling from the events of this past week. After I shared my story, I knew I had to make things right with Milan and confront my family. I couldn't let their narrow-mindedness slide anymore. I decided to come clean to Milan about the family trip. I was terrified of his reaction, but I had to be honest. When I told him, his face fell, and for the first time, I saw the hurt I'd been trying to protect him from. He didn't get angry though. Instead, he asked me why I felt the need to lie. That conversation was one of the hardest I've ever had. Milan reminded me that he's faced this kind of thing before and that he can handle it, but what he needed was my support, not my lies. Feeling like the worst girlfriend ever, I promised Milan I'd stand by him and address the issue with my family. I couldn't shake off the guilt, knowing I'd let him down. Milan, with his incredible capacity for forgiveness, just held me and said we'd face it together. The next day, I gathered my courage and called a family meeting. I was shaking as I told them about the hurtful impact of their jokes and comments. My dad tried to brush it off, saying they were just having a bit of fun, but I stood my ground. I explained that Milan's heritage is something to be respected, not mocked. My mom was quiet, her earlier defense of Milan now seeming hollow. My brothers, who'd always been the tough guys, actually looked a bit ashamed when I pointed out how their words were not just offensive, but downright discriminatory. My younger sister, who'd always been the quiet one, surprised us all by backing me up fiercely, telling the family that their behavior was unacceptable. The real shock came when my dad, after a long silence, actually apologized. He admitted he hadn't thought about how his words could be hurtful. It wasn't a complete turnaround, but it was a start. My mom followed suit, and even my brothers mumbled apologies. But the drama didn't end there. The family trip was still on, and Milan, being the incredible person he is, insisted we go. He said it was important to face these issues head-on rather than run from them. I was worried, but I agreed. The weekend started tensely, with everyone walking on eggshells around Milan. But then, something unexpected happened. Milan, with his charm and genuine interest in people, started winning my family over. He shared stories about his culture, answered questions, and even taught my youngest niece a few words in Romani. However, the real test came on the last night. We were all sitting around the campfire when my oldest brother made a snide remark about Milan's family moving around a lot. I was about to jump in, but Milan beat me to it. He calmly explained the history of the Romani people, their struggles, and how proud he was of his nomadic heritage. You could have heard a pin drop. Then, my brother did something I never thought I'd see. He apologized, genuinely and sincerely. He admitted he'd been ignorant and thanked Milan for educating him. It was a jaw-dropping moment for everyone. The rest of the trip passed without incident, and it felt like a new chapter was starting for my family. Milan and I grew closer, and I learned a valuable lesson about honesty and standing up for what's right. But just when I thought we'd turned a corner, another confrontation awaited us back home. My dad's brother, my Uncle Rick, who hadn't been on the trip, caught wind of the new family dynamic and decided to give his 2 cents. He cornered Milan at a family dinner, spouting the same old prejudices. This time, without hesitation, I stepped in. I told Uncle Rick that his views were not welcome and that if he couldn't respect Milan, he wouldn't be welcome either. It was a bold move, and it caused a rift, but Milan squeezed my hand under the table, and I knew I'd done the right thing. The fallout from that dinner is still ongoing. Uncle Rick is stubborn, and some family members think I was too harsh. But Milan stands by me, and so does my sister, and surprisingly, my parents and brothers. Co-worker always complains about the lunch I get her, so I stop including her, and she trashes me to others. But when she accuses me of sabotage, HR steps in, and I quit lunch duty. Since the pandemic, I rarely go into the office in person. I go in maybe once a month, and when I do, I like to order out for lunch to try new restaurants. My co-workers noticed I was ordering fun lunches and wanted in, so now when I go into the office, I'll circulate an email inviting other people to order. If they Venmo me the cost of their food, I'll pick up the order from the restaurant. I am not making any profit here. Everyone pays for their own food, myself included. I am simply driving out to pick up the orders and bring them back to the office. One of my co-workers orders every time I am in. The thing is, she is an extremely picky eater to the point that I don't know why she bothers trying new restaurants. Since she is always unhappy, she essentially eats plain meat, no seasoning, and cannot be ethnic meat, whatever that means, and either plain rice or bread. She does eat chicken nuggets, hamburgers, and plain foods like that. She doesn't eat vegetables or dairy, and her food cannot have any seasoning, not even salt. If her meal comes with anything else, she gets upset. I've asked, and she does not have any food allergies. She makes so many modifications and special requests to her orders, and somehow every restaurant always gets her orders wrong. She gets mad at me every time this happens. It's to the point where I open up her order at the restaurant before I leave, at her request, to double check if they prepared the food how she wants. But half the time, I don't even know what to look for because her order is so specific. She's asked me to drive her food back, get a refund, etc. I think this is unreasonable and also would take time out of my workday. I am not a paid meal delivery service. For example, last week I went out and picked up Chipotle for everyone, about 10 people. For her order, she wanted white rice and carne asada, with nothing else. I thought this would be easy. I did the pickup option, and in the store, I sorted through the bags and opened her order. It looked right to me. When I got back to work, she was pissed. I guess she was mad that her bowl was not full enough. She wanted me to leave the office and drive back to Chipotle and ask them to fill it to the top with more rice and carne asada. I refused because I had a meeting and didn't have time. Also, I didn't think it was my job. She felt like she didn't get her money's worth and then asked me for a refund. I didn't pay her, and I went to my meeting and haven't spoken to her since. As more background, this woman works in a completely different department from me. She is in no way my supervisor or anything like that. Would I be the idiot if I tell her I can't pick up her order anymore? It's getting to the point where my offer to pick up everyone's lunches is stressing me out. It used to be fun to get out of the office to stretch my legs, but now I dread it. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot. I think you should try a softer approach first. Something like, due to the growing number of orders, I won't be able to do any quality control on pickups going forward. If your order is not fulfilled by the restaurant, you will be responsible for resolving it with the restaurant. I won't be able to return them or compensate anyone. Please order accordingly. If you are clear about your role and she still complains, you can totally blacklist her. Comment 2. Absolutely. You would not be an idiot. I guess she was mad that her bowl was not full enough. She wanted me to leave the office and drive back to Chipotle and ask them to fill it to the top with more rice and carne asada. You're doing this for people as a nice thing, a favor. Your description of her behavior is a litany of H-olery. No, never again. Go kick rocks. In whatever terms someone as nice as you are says that. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for all the comments on my last post. I wanted to give you an update on the lunch situation at work, and let me tell you, it's been a rough couple of weeks. So, after the whole Chipotle fiasco, I thought things would cool down, but boy was I wrong. My coworker, let's call her Karen, didn't take it well when I finally told her I couldn't pick up her order anymore. She confronted me right in the middle of the office, and it was like a scene straight out of a soap opera. She accused me of being selfish and not understanding her needs. I tried to stay calm, but it was tough with everyone staring at us. Now, let me give you a bit of history on Karen. She's been with the company for years, and she's known for being difficult. I remember when she first started, she would bring her own lunch every day, and it was always the same, plain chicken and rice. No one really paid much attention until she started joining in on the group orders. Anyway, back to the confrontation. I explained to her that it wasn't my responsibility to ensure her order was perfect, especially with her very particular tastes. She stormed off, and I thought that was the end of it. But later that day, I found out she had been bad-mouthing me to some of our co-workers, saying I was the reason she was starving because I wouldn't help her out. The next time I went into the office, I stuck to my guns and didn't include her in the lunch email. But then, during lunchtime, Karen came up to me with tears in her eyes. She told me she had no one else to turn to and that she was going through a tough time. Her long-term boyfriend had broken up with her, and she was feeling alone. I felt a pang of sympathy, but I also remembered how she had treated me. In the midst of all this, another co-worker, let's call him Mike, got involved. Mike has always been the office charmer, and he's got a history with Karen. They used to date, and it was the talk of the office for months. They broke up a while ago, but there was always this tension between them. Mike pulled me aside and told me that Karen was really struggling with the breakup and that her behavior was a cry for help. He asked if I could just give her another chance. I was hesitant, but I agreed to talk to her. So, I sat down with Karen and we had a heart-to-heart. She opened up about how her ex-boyfriend was the one who always took care of her meals because he understood her eating habits. Now that he was gone, she felt lost. I started to understand why she was so fixated on her lunch orders. I decided to give her one last chance. The next time I went to pick up lunch, I made sure to double-check her order myself. But when I got back to the office, Karen was nowhere to be found. It turns out she had left early for a doctor's appointment and forgot to tell me. When she finally came back, she saw her lunch sitting on her desk, cold and unappetizing. She lost it. She yelled at me in front of everyone, saying I had done it on purpose. That's when Mike stepped in and tried to calm her down, but she wouldn't have any of it. She threw her lunch in the trash and stormed out. The next day, Karen didn't show up to work. Rumors started flying around that she had been given a warning by HR for her outburst. Mike looked guilty, like he felt responsible for pushing me to help her. As for me, I've decided that I'm done with the lunch runs. It's not worth the drama, and I need to focus on my own work. I haven't heard from Karen since that day, and I'm not sure when or if she'll be back at the office. I reveal Dad's dark past to Nurse, and she tells him so he blows up at me, and now my son won't talk to me, and Brother takes his side while Dad plans to leave, and I'm left with regret. 2 years ago, my dad broke his hip. He has regained the ability to walk with a mobility aid, but cannot live alone. So he agreed to move into an assisted living rehab program. Now, my dad and I do not have a good relationship. He was not a good father growing up, emotionally hurtful, spoke down to us every opportunity he had. He was also awful to our mother and very controlling. The only reason my brother and I stayed in his life was for our mother. Once she passed away 3 years ago, it was like a switch flipped. He became this nice, caring man. The issue was, he wanted to pretend the past didn't exist. My brother and I are both in therapy and offered to go with him. He refused, saying the past is the past. We both went low contact after a huge argument where our dad claimed we were being jerks for not magically forgiving him and wanting to force him into therapy. However, after he broke his hip, we got back in contact. He is actually more understanding now, still unwilling to attend therapy, but the three of us have come to an acceptance that this relationship is fractured. My brother hasn't visited my dad in a year, though he is our dad's power of attorney and handles all the medical, financial, etc. choices. I visit once every few months, but never for very long. Now, as I said, my dad is a huge charmer. He has the nurses wrapped around his finger. More than once, they've made comments about how they wish my dad had more visitors. I shrugged it off. One nurse in particular, Sandra, has made the most comments. My son is in his 20s, and he visits my dad often. My dad was always a better grandfather than he was a dad, so I support their relationship. My son recently broke his ankle, so he couldn't visit my dad for a bit. I agreed to take him. I sat in the room, responding to emails from work and the like. Sandra came in and started gushing over my dad and my son. I went to make a call. Sandra followed me and mentioned some event the home was having for families. I said my son was going. She asked if I was. I said no. She said I really should be involved more, and how sad it was that he doesn't have many visitors. She mentioned that we only have so much time, and we don't want regrets, do we? I tried to shrug her off, but she kept going on. Finally, I snapped and told her everything my dad had done, including refusing to do the work to repair the relationship. Sandra was in shock and said she didn't expect that. I said, "Yeah, so maybe mind your own business." Sandra walked away. Well, I guess Sandra has been less friendly with my dad, still doing her job, but my dad says that she's not being as warm, and she strictly does her job, nothing else. I don't think he knows what happened, as I didn't tell him. When telling my husband this, he said I should have kept my mouth shut and just brushed Sandra off. That my dad is a different man now, and while it's okay for me to want to keep my distance, I shouldn't ruin his friendship's dynamics now. Am I the idiot? Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot. Sandra was, and continues to be, very unprofessional. If she, a near stranger, was not literally harassing you in the hospital, you never would have had this conversation. I do think there is validity to the idea that his past transgressions should not poison relationships he has made since. and it would have been better if you'd found another way to put her in her place without airing a lot of dirty laundry. But I don't consider you TA for how this came out. Comment 2, not the idiot. He refused, saying, "The past is the past." I hate this. It's rug sweeping, and it is invalidating. It's one thing if both parties agree to let bygones be bygones. It's another if just the offender wants to forgive and forget, or let the past stay in the past in an effort to diminish the suffering of their victims. Pushing reconciliation after one of the two parties refuses is disrespectful. Now for the update. Hey Reddit. It's been a month since I last posted about the situation with my dad and the nurse, Sandra, at his assisted living facility. I've got some updates that I think you'll find pretty interesting. So, after the whole blow-up with Sandra, things got really tense. My dad started noticing that Sandra was acting different around him. He's not dumb. He could tell something was off. He kept asking me if I knew why she was suddenly so cold, but I played dumb. I didn't want to admit that I'd spilled the beans about our rocky past. But here's where it gets juicy. My dad, being the charmer that he is, decided to confront Sandra about her change in behavior. He's always been the type to face things head-on, even if it's not always the best approach. Well, Sandra, she's a straight shooter too. She told him everything I had said. You can imagine how that went down. My dad was furious. He felt betrayed that I'd shared our personal history with someone he considered a friend. He called me up, and we had a huge argument over the phone. He said I had no right to air our dirty laundry like that. And I shot back that maybe if he'd been a better father, I wouldn't have such dirty laundry to air in the first place. Now, remember how I mentioned my brother is the power of attorney and hasn't visited in a year? Well, he got dragged into this mess too. My dad called him, ranting about how I'd ruined his relationship with Sandra and how he felt alone now. My brother, who's always been the peacemaker, tried to calm him down, but my dad wasn't having any of it. In the midst of all this, my son, who's been recovering from his broken ankle, decided to visit his grandpa again. He's always seen the best in my dad, and I didn't want to ruin that for him. But when he got there, he walked in on my dad in the middle of a heated phone call with my brother. My son didn't get the warm welcome he was expecting. Instead, he got a front row seat to our family drama. My son came back from that visit looking like he'd seen a ghost. He told me he'd never seen Grandpa so angry and that it scared him. He said he didn't want to get caught in the middle of this anymore. That broke my heart. I never wanted my son to feel the way I did growing up, caught in the crossfire of my dad's temper. But here's the real kicker, the part that feels like a punch in the gut. My dad, in his anger, told my son some things about me that I'd never shared with anyone. He brought up mistakes I'd made in my past, things I'm not proud of, and used them to paint me as the bad guy in all this. My son was shocked, and I could see the way he looked at me change. It's like my dad had planted seeds of doubt in his mind about who I was. I tried to explain to my son that people make mistakes and that I wasn't the same person I was back then. But the damage was done. My son has been distant since that conversation, and it feels like I'm losing him. Just like I lost my dad all those years ago. As for Sandra, she's still keeping her distance from my dad. She's professional, but nothing more. My dad says the place doesn't feel like home anymore. He's even started talking about moving to a different facility. But with his health, that's not really an option. My husband, who initially told me I should have kept quiet, now sees the fallout and has been trying to support me through this. He's been great, but I can't shake the feeling that I've messed up big time. If you liked this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.